This is what the inside of a lithium-ion battery looks like. It's not exactly high-tech, just 2 meters of foil coated in black paste, all packed into this tiny 45-gram cylinder. Laptops send electric vehicles to orbiting satellites. Yet when a battery fails, all that energy can get released in the wrong way. Oh my god, the latest incident involving lithium-ion batteries. So how did something so rudimentary looking end up in almost every electronic device on the planet? And why don't we have anything better? In the early 1980s, most rechargeable batteries were stuck at just 40 to 60 watt-hours per kilogram, meaning you would need a kilogram of battery to power a 40-watt light bulb for just an hour. As a result, when the first commercial mobile phone launched in 1983, it was pretty unimpressive. It took 10 hours to charge for just 30 minutes of talk time. Everyone from electronics giants to oil companies were trying to make a better battery because they knew that even just doubling the energy density could unlock a new era of portable electronics and power the digital revolution. In 1972, a 32-year-old British chemist named Stanley Whittingham was studying how different materials store energy at Exxon's research lab in New Jersey. They were researching batteries. The next year, war broke out between Egypt, Syria, and Israel. When the US backed Israel, Arab oil producers cut off oil exports in retaliation. And on December 22nd, the price of crude oil more than doubled from $5.12 a barrel to $11.65. At Exxon, executives were worried that supplies would run out entirely, so they started looking seriously at alternatives like electricity. In fact, in 1900, when cars were first taking off, the top-selling car was electric, ahead of steam and gas-powered cars. But the problem with these electric cars was their batteries. They weighed 360 kilograms, around 40% of the car's weight, but they could only take you around 60 kilometers. So by 1924, gas-powered cars outnumbered electric 10,000 to 1. But now that the oil supplies were running out, it seemed to Exxon that there was no other solution than to bring back the electric car. And to do that, they needed a battery with a much higher energy density. The very first battery dates back to a curious incident in the 1780s, when Italian scientist Luigi Galvani was dissecting a frog to study its anatomy. He anchored one side of the frog on a brass hook and went to cut it open with a steel scalpel. But when he touched the scalpel to the frog's leg, he noticed it suddenly twitched, as if it had come back to life. Galvani believed he'd discovered a sort of animal electricity, a living force produced by the tissue itself. But Galvani's rival, Alessandro Volta, disagreed. He thought it came from the metals themselves. And you can see this with lots of different materials. Veritasium producer Gregor set up a version of this experiment, minus the frog, to test it out. I have zinc, magnesium, and iron here. I can take any of these metals, stick them into one side of a lemon, and stick some copper on the other side. If I hook these up to a voltmeter, I should be getting a voltage. And we got around 0.8 volts. Now, the reason this happens is because some elements want to get rid of their electrons more than others. So if you pair one that really doesn't want its electrons with one that really wants some, well, then the electrons are going to be traveling across. You've got one side that gives up electrons, that's the anode, and you've got one that receives them, that's the cathode. But why do you need the lemon at all? If there's no flow of the positive ions through to the other side, the electrons stop moving almost immediately. That's because electrons can't travel through lemon juice. Liquids like this don't have free electrons the way metals do, so electrons stay in the wire. They'll only leave the circuit at the copper side if there's something in the juice, like hydrogen ions, ready to take them, and if the reaction releases enough energy to make that transfer happen. Up until the early 1970s, just about every commercial battery used a water-based electrolyte, and as a result, none of these battery cells could push much beyond the 1.23 volt limit. Now, the total energy a battery can store depends on how much energy each charge has to give, times how much charge can move. So Whittingham had to switch out the water-based electrolyte for something else, and that change unlocked the possibility of higher voltages. He turned to a solution of lithium salt in an organic solvent, and it worked. But it came with serious risks. The solvent was volatile, the lithium salt was chemically unstable. Together they formed a mixture that could explode or release toxic fumes if mishandled. Everything had to be done with extreme caution. A stray spark or a trace of moisture could destroy the experiment or start a fire. I don't normally think about batteries this way, but what they really are is tiny little contained chemical reactions. And in a chemical reaction, if you could get a 60% yield, that would be considered good. But in a battery, especially one that you want to recharge 1,000 times, you need that reaction to be, say, 99.9% efficient, because if it's not, the capacity of that battery rapidly deteriorates. If you have, say, a 95% yield, then you'd lose a significant fraction of lithium ions every cycle. After just 50 cycles, you'd only have 8% of your original capacity left. To prove it, he placed a test cell containing metallic lithium into a safety rig, one that's designed to test explosives. Then he dropped a heavy iron rod onto it. It exploded violently. Then he ran the same test again, but this time with his new design using carbon as the anode. He charged the cell, placed it in the rig, and dropped the rod. But nothing happened. The contrast was undeniable. But what's crazy is that even after all this, these batteries should never have worked. See, when you charge the battery for the first time, lithium ions move from the cathode to the graphite anode. And here they react with the electrolyte to form this weird, complex patchwork of compounds that build up on the anode surface. These parasitic side reactions should keep going on indefinitely, using up all the lithium and destroying the cell. But they don't. Instead, they form a thin protective layer known as the solid electrolyte interface, or SEI. It's a kind of chemical shield protecting both the graphite anode and the electrolyte from further reactions. But crucially, lithium ions can still slip through it. When the SEI originally forms during the first charging cycle, around 5% of the lithium in the cell actually gets stuck in this layer, decreasing the battery's capacity. But this little trade-off is what makes the batteries stable enough to be used for years or even decades, which is why today lithium-ion batteries are virtually everywhere.